Okay, just let me know. Okay. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining the Wednesday program. Hello, everyone. Okay. Thanks for joining the Wednesday program. Hello, everyone. Hello, everyone. Okay. It was echoing. Now I think it is okay. Hare Krishna, everyone. Thanks for joining. Today's topic, we are going to discuss Yoga of the Supreme Person. That is the 15th chapter, Srimad Bhagavad Gita as it is, written by Srila Prabhupada. And we will discuss why Krishna spoke all those verses in that chapter. We'll take a look at the background of the questions Arjuna asked towards the end of the 14th chapter, and how that what Lord Krishna explained in the 15th chapter, which is the Yoga of the Supreme Person, is related to that. Before we do that, we will chant the Mangalacharan prayers for the success of this discourse. So I will go ahead and I will share my screen. Mataji, can you please give me control to share the screen? Om Jnanatimirandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Sri Guruve Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamiyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vande Aham Sri Guru Sri Utapada Kamalam Sri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Sri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Sri Vishakhan Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namastute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Sri Vasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ramo 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 Hare Hare. Now we'll first take a look at the questions Arjuna is asking towards the end of the 14th chapter. So Arjuna inquired, that's the verse 21 of the 14th chapter. Arjuna inquired, "O my dear Lord, by which symptoms is one known who is transcendental to these three modes?" He's actually talking about the three modes of material nature, which is the title of this chapter, the 14th chapter. And he sees that in these three modes, there's a lot of confusion, and at the end of the day, the person, a living entity, is struggling. And so he is asking, what is the symptoms of a person who is transcendental to these three modes? Because that is what Lord Krishna explains in the previous verse, the verse number 20, where a transcendental person, can cross the birth, death, old age, and distress, and enjoy nectar even in this life, which of course Arjuna was not enjoying. He was in distress. So he's asking, what is the symptom of that person who is transcendental to these three modes? What is his behavior, and how does he transcend the modes of the nature? Of course, the last question is the most relevant one. But still, we need to know that if we have reached that stage, those symptoms, those behavior are think of them like a dashboard of a car, right? We know we stepped on the gas, and now by looking at the dashboard, we know we are at our, the targeted speed, which is maybe 70 miles per hour or 80 miles per hour. Similarly, you transcend the modes of nature. How do you do that? That's definitely relevant. But it is also important to know what are the symptoms and what are the behavior, so that if someone has reached that stage, if you have reached that stage, right? Then the Supreme Personality Godhead, of course, talks about various traits, various behaviors. He says that he does not hate illumination, attachment, delusion. He is always situated in self. He regards alike happiness and distress. Like for him, a lump of earth, stone, piece of gold, they're all the same. Honor, dishonor, nothing matters, basically, those things, right? And he has announced all material activities. So such a person is said to have transcended the modes of nature. So Lord Krishna makes a point that he has renounced all material activities, right? So in the next verse, Lord Krishna is saying, instead of renouncing all material activities, which is very hard for a person to do, instead dovetail that to serve Lord Krishna. And that is what he's talking about, full devotional service in the next verse. Now, if one does that, of course, the key word is full, means complete, not mixed devotional service, not like 30% material, 70% devotional, not like that, 100% devotional service, then unfailing in all circumstances, then he at once transcends the modes of material nature and thus comes to the level of Brahman, right? And he also says that I am the basis of that impersonal Brahman. He's sort of giving a hint here. He's giving a hint that if you come to me, then you will get the same level of happiness as that you get when you go to the level of Brahman, because I am the basis of that impersonal Brahman, which is immortal, imperishable, and eternal, and is the constitutional position of the ultimate happiness. Now, just pay attention to this word imperishable, and we'll pick relation of this particular usage of this word in this verse and what is going to explain in the first verse of the 15th chapter. So here Lord Krishna is telling how to transcend the modes of nature quickly. I won't say easily, but quickly, if someone can do full devotional service, and can also indirectly, he says, he can also get the same happiness as the happiness you get in the, not same, but that even more, basically, maybe, But definitely in this verse, text 27, he's saying that you will definitely get that happiness that you get by reaching the level of Brahman. Okay? So that is what he stops here. Now the question may arise that what about if devotional service is everything, what about all those things mentioned in the Vedic scriptures, all the Vedic hymns, the 4 Vedas, the Upanishads and all that, right? So someone may ask that question. If devotional service is everything, why we need all that? And that is what is the beginning of the 15th chapter, where Lord Krishna starts explaining that. And I will go verse by verse. Okay. To move it to one side. Yeah. And this name of this chapter is also the Yoga of the Supreme Person, and we'll see that why it is called so as we progress through the verses. Sri Bhagavan Uvacha Urdhvamulam Adhasakham Ashwatham Prahur Avyayam Chandamsi Yasya Parnani Yastam Veda Savedavid. Sri Bhagavan Vacha, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, said, Urdhva Moolam. So the roots are up, other downwards, Sakam branches. So branches are down, roots are up. Ashwatham, a banyan tree. Prahur is said, Avvayam, eternal. Chandamsi, the Vedic hymn, Yasya, of which Parnani, the leaves of that banyan tree, is said to be the Vedic hymns. Yaha, anyone, tam, that, Veda, knows the Sa, he, Vedavid, the knower of the Vedas. A person who, what is the translation? The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, it is said that there is an imperishable banyan tree that has its roots upward and its branches down. Normally, we don't see such a tree, right? The roots are down, branches up. We don't have experience of a tree like that. There is another word I would like you to pull your attention is what I said before, imperishable. This banyan tree is imperishable. There are trees in this world which are like 5,000 years old, 7,000 years old, but still they are perishable. They are not imperishable. But this banyan tree is imperishable. Okay, its roots are upward, its branches are down. We have seen trees, banyan trees with leaves. We have not seen banyan trees with leaves, which are Vedic hymns, right? So definitely this paying attention to few of these verses makes it very clear that Lord Krishna is not talking about a mundane tree or even a tree that we experience in this world. He is trying to explain a concept, okay, through the analogy of the banyan tree. And the another thing he's talking about is the leaves. So leaves in a tree, what does leaves in a tree do? It takes the nourishments from the root, it takes the carbon dioxide from the air, it goes through the process of photosynthesis, and what it does, it prepares the food for the tree by which the tree survives. So Vedic hymns, Lord Krishna is saying, in this imaginary tree, okay, the Vedic hymns serve that purpose. You can get ghee, you can get all the ingredients of the yajna, but if you don't offer them to the Lord through the Vedic hymns, then there will not be any benefit of doing that. Right? So that is why Vedic hymns have been, sort of analogous to the leaves, because that is what is the factory. Vedic hymns is the factory by which, the nourishment of the tree takes place. Okay. Let us now go to the next verse and see what Lord Krishna is talking further about that tree. So here we see that this tree is imperishable. So he is probably talking about, Brahman. Okay. He's talking about that imperishability of Brahman. He's trying to compare with that. Okay. He's now taking Arjuna through that journey of how Vedas is connected to whatever is said in the, the Vedic hymns is connected to whatever is said in the last verse of the previous chapter. Now let's go to the next verse. Adhaschordhvam prasastastasya shakha guna pravardha vishaya pravala adhascha mulani anushantatani karmanubandhini manushaloke. Adha downward, cha and urdhvam upward, prasasta extended, tasya its sakha branches, guna by the modes of material nature. So the modes of material nature is what is actually driving these branches either upward or downward. A similar thing has been mentioned in somewhat in the 17th or I think in the 18th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, where Lord Krishna is saying those who are in the mode of goodness go upwards, those in the mode of passion live in the earthly planets, and those in the mode of ignorance go downward to the hellish planets. Right? So these branches are what is taking them, but it is the modes of nature which is driving a living entity in that direction. Okay? The activities in those modes of nature. Right? Pravarda developed, Vishaya sense objects, Pravala twigs, Adha downward. So the twigs, right, which are the sense objects, the things which gives us pleasure to our sense of sound and touch and smell, right? We get attracted to those things depending on the modes of nature, and then we perform acts which either takes us towards that or towards downward direction. Cha and mulani roots, anushantatani extended, karma to work, anubandhini bound, manushya loke in the world of human society. Now this tree also has the roots going, the bound to the karma. Why? Because the next, the life, the body that living entity will get in next life will depend on the karma in this life. So the modes of nature is driving a person to achieve certain sense objects, right? In the process, he is walking, and that whatever karma is gathering as a result of that, then drives him to, get a body in the next life, either as a demigod or he goes to the, Maharloka, Janaloka, or even to the Brahmaloka, the planet of Brahma, or he goes down to the, all the patals, various patals, or maybe a hellish life, like, even in the earthly planet, he may get a hellish life, like the body of a hog or tiger or whatever, depending on the type of karma he did. Right? So the branches of this tree extend downward and upward, right? Nourished by the three modes of material nature. The twigs are the objects of the senses. That is what attracts him, okay, depending on the modes of nature. And this tree also has roots going down and is bound to fruitive actions of human society. So when he's attracted to those objects of senses, he performs acts. And the acts he performs in those modes of nature, particular mode of nature, then further, through those roots, he goes down and gets a new body. So he has to keep coming down to the earthly planet, perform his work, and based on the work, he goes up to a particular planet or goes down. So the earthly planets are the place of work. Think of them like, you're doing all the hard work and then you are getting a result. That result you enjoy or you suffer in the upper or lower planets. But the actual work is happening in the earthly planets. Okay. न रूपम अश्येह ततोपलभ्यते नान्तो न चादिर्न च संप्रतिष्ठा अस्वत्थमेनां सुविरूढमूलम् असंग शस्त्रेण दृढेन चित्वा ततः पदं तत्परिमार्गतिव्यम् यस्मिन् गता न निवर्तन्ति भूया तम एव चाद्यं पुरुषं प्रपद्ये यतः प्रवृत्ति प्रसृता पुराणी. Na, not. Rupam, the form, Ashya, of this tree, Iha, in this world, Tatha, also. Upalabhyate, can be perceived. Na, never. Anta, end. Na, never. Cha, also. Adi, beginning. Na, never. Cha, also. Tam, sampratistha, the foundation. Aswatham, banyan tree. So he is explaining, Lord Krishna is explaining that, first of all, the form of this tree, the real form of this tree, cannot be perceived in this world. Nor can one know when it began and where it ended. Right? The foundation. Enam, this suviruda, strongly, mulam, rooted, asanga sastrena. Okay, but this is a very strongly rooted tree, right? Had been going on, no beginning, no end, so must be very strongly rooted tree. Asanga sastrena, by the weapon of detachment. Asanga, detachment. Sastrena, okay, the weapon. Dridena, strong. Chitva, cutting. Tatah, thereafter. One has to be very strong. Right? The detachment has to be very, very strong. Okay. Chitva, tata, thereafter. Padam, situation. Tat, that. Parimar, gitavyam, has to be searched out. Okay. One has to first cut with a strong weapon of detachment, and then he has to search out what? Yasmin, where? Gata, going. Na, never. Nivartanti, they come back. Bhuya, again. Tam, to him. Eva, certainly. Cha, also. Adyam, original. Purusham, the personality of Godhead. Prapadye, surrender. Yata, from whom? Pravirti, the beginning. Prasharta, extended. Purani, very old. I will read the translation and I will try to again connect it to whatever Lord Krishna answered in the last verses of 14th chapter. The real form of this tree cannot be perceived in this world. No one can understand where it ends, where it begins, or where its foundation is. But with determination, one must cut down this strongly rooted tree with the weapon of detachment. Thereafter, one must seek that place from which, having gone, one never returns, and there surrender to that supreme personality of Godhead, from whom everything began and from whom everything has extended since time immemorial. So, if we take this tree, if you go back previous couple of verses, it did say that it has roots upward, it has, the branches down. Almost would seem like a reflection, right? It's only possible in a reflection, right? If you see a picture of someone, the head's down and the legs up, of course, if he's not doing sirsasana, right, is typically would be a reflection of that person, right? It's not a normal person, the legs will be down and the head will be up. Same thing with the tree, branches up, leaves up, and the roots down. So the real form of this, so it is a reflection, and Lord Krishna is confirming here that real form of this tree cannot be perceived in this world. That means there is a real form of this tree, but not in this world of matter, world of darkness. No one can understand where it ends, where it begins, or where its foundation is, naturally, right? Because it is coming from that, where it ends, where it begins, sort of explaining the imperishability of the tree. So that means it is coming from that Brahman, right? The tree is coming from that Brahman, which is imperishable, right? So Brahman is not only the source of happiness, but it is also the source of this false tree in this world. But with determination, now the false tree, okay, so if it is a source of that false tree, and we know the Brahman, one of the nature of Brahman is it is sort of attributeless. Then that means there is something beyond Brahman, okay, from where this reflection of this tree is coming to this world. So one has to cut down this strongly rooted tree with the weapon of detachment. Lord Krishna is talking about, of course, this tree, which is the tree you see in this material world, right? And after doing that, one must seek that place from which, having gone, one never returns, and there surrender to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, from whom everything began and from everything has extended since time immemorial. So Lord Krishna is saying few things here. If you look at the previous verses of this chapter and the previous chapter, he is sort of repeating the same thing which he said in the last verse of the 14th chapter, which is, if you look at the 14th chapter, he is saying, and I am the basis of the impersonal Brahman, which is immortal, imperishable, and eternal, and is the constitutional position of ultimate happiness. Right? So he's sort of repeating the same thing, that he of course, he does not say here that everything came from Brahman, but through the analogy of this tree, he is saying that this tree is that same, this example of this tree I'm giving you is the same impersonal Brahman, and whose basis I am. And that is what he's saying. Thereafter, having gone, one never returns. The surrender to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, from whom everything began and from whom everything has extended since time immemorial, which makes sense, right? Because Brahman is time immemorial, it extended time immemorial. So even Brahman also came from, Supreme Personality of Godhead. And all these varieties in this world, which is caused by the desires of living entity, by following their material modes of nature, working through the Vedic hymns, trying to achieve the sense objects, is actually causing this tree to further grow, because it has to go down and come up again. And the branches have to go, because the more the desires, more the living entity is working, more it is creating desires and it is creating karma. So it has to come back and it has to go up. So the branches of the tree keeps growing and growing and growing. And then I will go to the next verse, and after that I will stop and see if anyone has any comments, any questions or feedback. Okay. Nirmana moha jita sanga dosa adhyatma nitya vinivrita kama dvandver vimukta sukha dukha samgya gachanti amura padam avvayam tat. Ni, without; mana, false prestige; moha, an illusion; jita, having conquered; sangha, of association; dosa, the faults; adhyatma, in spiritual knowledge; nitya, in eternity; vinivrita, disassociated; kama, from lust; dvande, from the dualities; vimukta, liberated; sukha dukha, happiness and distress; samgya, named; gachanti, attain; amura, unbewildered; padam, situation; avvayam, eternal; tat, that. Those who are free from false prestige, illusion, and false association, who understand the eternal, who are done with material lust, who are freed from the dualities of happiness and distress, and who, unbewildered, know how to surrender unto the Supreme Person, attain to that eternal kingdom. Now, this particular verse definitely needs a lot more explanation. So I'm going to just stop here, and I'll stop sharing. Okay, I'll stop here and see if anyone has any comments, any questions to add, to whatever explained just now. Looks like we are just 3 here, but maybe there are questions in online. I don't know. And it doesn't have to be questions. Someone can always give comments and feedback. Okay, I will assume that means there are no comments, there are no questions. So I will go back. So whatever Lord Krishna explained in the end of 14th chapter about Brahman, that he is the basis of that imperishable Brahman, he further explains the Brahman aspect of his Brahman aspect in these few verses, that how the same Brahman, which is undifferentiated, becomes differentiated because of the unlimited desires of the living entities, and how one should leave this world, and why he is asking to leave, because he did not say anything in the previous verses about these living entities are distressed, which means he's actually talking about Arjuna's questions in the previous verse, where Arjuna, in the previous chapter, where Arjuna is talking about how one can, enjoy nectar even in this life. That means while doing all these things, the living entities are not enjoying. They are just thinking they will enjoy, that promise of happiness. They're pursuing that promise of happiness, but they're not getting that happiness. They're attracted by that promise of happiness. They're chasing one branch, okay, for one sense object. Then either in the same life they don't like it, they go to another branch, right? They keep switching, generates karma, goes back, an unfulfilled desire, they get another body, and they keep pursuing. The reason why they're doing that, the living entity, is because they are not getting that happiness. Okay, so now let's see what Lord Krishna is saying, that how to get to that level. Okay, how to get to that level. So he's saying those who are free from false prestige. That's the first word he's saying. So these things we might have also experienced this in our life. When we get to a certain level, okay, as expected by the society, because all the levels in the society are the expectations set by society. Some are tacit, some are explicit, right? Some are understood and some are explicit, has been. And we try to reach those stages, okay, which gives externally, probably gives some sort of recognition or happiness, but internally it means, it gives a lot of distress, a lot of anxiety. And what if this prestige goes away, right? So that is what Lord Krishna is talking about, false prestige. They are doing their work, they're doing their duty, but they're not doing it for any to gain any prestige. Okay. And what is the source of this? This is actually comes from illusion and false association. So this illusion and false association is not necessary always to an object or to a relationship. It can also mean association, false association to a particular way of thinking. Okay, those are very subtle, but that also can be a sort of false association. Who understand the eternal, right? Who are done with material lust. Now, who understand the eternal? It is eternal. Whenever this concept of eternal, imperishable, is actually Lord Krishna is talking about that, happiness which you get from Brahman, which is eternal, or even beyond that, much better happiness beyond that, right? Which in the previous verse, Lord Krishna says that I am source of everything. So he's source of Brahman, which he explicitly says in the last verse of the 14th chapter also. So something eternal can only give birth to something eternal, right? If Brahman is eternal, then the source of that has to be eternal, right? And so that is how this eternal is linked to the previous verses, and who are done with material lust. It's important to understand why Lord Krishna is talking about material lust here. If you remember towards the end of the third chapter, right, Karma Yoga, Lord Krishna is telling Arjuna that one should stay in one's occupation which is in line or aligned with his nature, okay, and try to perform that even if imperfectly, than picking up another occupation which does not align with his nature, guna or karma, and perform it perfectly, right? Which Arjuna was about to do. He was about to take sannyas. He was a kshatriya, he was a householder, he was planning to live like a brahmana, begging and sannyas, right? So Arjuna is asking a question that why someone sometimes commit to sinful activities, okay, changing your occupation unnecessarily, whimsically is a sinful act, okay, and why a person does that, what forces that person to do those activities, and then he does that helplessly. He's not, he like some, as if someone is forcing him to do, he's helpless. Then Lord Krishna is explaining there, it is lust, okay, it is not so he clarifies that it's not super soul or something like that, it is actually the lust, Lord Krishna is saying, which forces, because the lust sits at the intelligence, the mind, and the senses, all the three strategic places, right? The intelligence decides, mind is where the decision takes place, based on either the past impressions, and senses by which you gather your inputs. So everything is compromised, right? So that is why Lord Krishna, of course, Lord Krishna goes on saying that how through through spiritual intelligence you can conquer that lust. But the point I'm making here is, even if we are free from sometimes, whether we are free from false prestige, illusion, and false association, really, okay, we understand the eternal, or it is just a theoretical knowledge, is it a realized state or is it theoretical, will be determined based on how much we are getting affected by material lust. If we are getting affected by material lust, that means our knowledge is still theoretical. We have not reached that realized stage. Okay, that is why Lord Krishna is specifically stressing on this fact that done with material lust, who are freed from the dualities of happiness and distress, and who, unbewildered, know how to surrender unto the Supreme Person, attain to that eternal kingdom. Right? So Lord Krishna is explaining very clearly that when you do that, then you become free from the dualities of happiness and distress. The reason why we become happy about certain things or we get distressed about certain things is because we either want something, or and if we get it, we are happy, and if we don't get it, we are distressed, or we are in a particular state, we lose it, which we pride, we take, we withdraw false prestige from it. If we lose it, then we get distress, and we have it, then we get recognition, and we feel those intermittent happiness, right? So that is all because of the attachment, and that attachment actually is a sign that we still have that material lust in us. Okay, and it is in very deep form, because of so many lifetimes we gathered this, but it is there. And who, unbewildered, know how to surrender unto the Supreme Person. And that is the time, because he is freed from the dualities of happiness and distress, therefore he is unbewildered. He doesn't get bewildered. Okay, he just knows that it is just my past karma taking its own course, right? And he keeps on doing his duty. He knows how to surrender unto the Supreme Person, attain to that eternal kingdom. Because Supreme Person in this world, we have not seen Supreme Person. We have seen his effects theoretically, right? But we have not seen Supreme Person. So to have faith in someone whom you have not seen, right, you need to have that steadiness of mind, right? You need to have that faith in your understanding of that eternal. Right? So therefore you need, and then you attain to that eternal kingdom. So this is critical. So let me now go to the next verse. न तद् भाष्यते सूर्यो न शशांको न पावक यत्कत्वा न निवर्तन्ते तद्धाम paramam mama. No, not that. Bhashyate illuminates. Surya, the sun. Na, not Sasanka, the moon. Na, not Pavaka, fire, electricity. Yat, where? Gatva, going. Na, never. Nivartante, they come back. Tadhama, that abode. Paramam, supreme, mama, mind. And the supreme abode of mind is not illumined by the sun or moon, nor by fire or electricity. Those who reach it never return to this material world. Now, while Lord Krishna is explaining, he explained how that, all that our current world is, the source is actually Brahman, and he is the source of that Brahman, right? He explained that. And now he's explaining, in the previous verse, he of course explained, how to reach there. Now here he's talking about what is the nature of that spiritual world, right? So I just remembered one experience I had about this whole sunlight thing. Um, we were in Alaska, and we are fortunately during the time of around May, towards the end of May, and there's few days there in Alaska when your day goes through, you have sunlight, then it becomes sort of twilight, and then the day starts again. Okay, the next day starts again. There is no night. And my experience was, we were trying to sleep, our whole family, myself, my daughter, and and Sukharupa, we were all trying to sleep, but we are not getting sleep. We had like so much of energy within us. And next day, when we drove to another place further north of Alaska, we had rented a car. We were not tired at all. We had so much of energy. And we realized that, is it because, and that is even an experience in this world, you will see that night actually does a sort of a tiring effect on a person. Just the lack of sunlight, okay, tires a person. Imagine a world where everything is self-illumined. There is no need of external sun or moon or their positions or external fire or electricity. Imagine so much of energy people will have to do anything. Right? So that is that spiritual world Lord Krishna is explaining. Of course, that what we experience is not really spiritual world, but that is just a sample of what could be, the spiritual world where no one sleeps, because everyone is, illumination is there all the time. There is no need of sleep. No one gets tired. Basically, everyone is engaged in devotional service all the time. Even if there is some sleep, that's probably just enacting some pastime, just to enact some pastime. Okay, it's not because you are getting tired. That's spiritual world. Okay, so Lord Krishna is giving some highlights, you can say, of that spiritual world, and those who reach it, they never return to this material. Why would they? Right? Why would they? Because that world, everything is illumined. You don't need any external source of energy. You don't have to pay any bills, right, for your energy. You have unlimited amount of energy. Then there are desert trees, right, by which whatever you want, you get it, right? But everything, of course, is engaged for the devotional service, okay, to Krishna. So why would you return to this material world? Lord Krishna will explain further, about the living entities here and there. So let's go to the next verse. Mamaivamsho jivaloke jivabhuta sanatana manah sastan nindriyani prakritisthani karsati. Mama, my, eva, certainly. Amsha, fragmental particle. Jiva loke, in the world of conditional life. Jiva bhuta, the conditioned living entity. Sanatana, eternal. Manaha, with the mind. Sastani, the six. Indriyani, senses. Prakriti, in material nature. Sthani, situated. Karshati is struggling hard. Right? So here Lord Krishna is further explaining the acts in that imperishable banyan tree, where he was explaining that they're bound by the karma, that fruitive actions. He is further telling that they are not really enjoying, they're struggling hard. They're struggling hard. He's explaining that they are struggling hard. They are his fragmental particles. Now, why is he worried about them? Because they are his part. Just like we are worried about our children, he is worried about his children. We all the living entities are his children, either in spiritual world or in material world. In material world, because they are struggling, he's worried. So that is why he's mentioning that they are struggling hard. Okay. And he is talking about another aspect of this conditional life. He's saying that and they're struggling because they're conditioned by what? The material modes of nature. They're trying to find that happiness, because being a living entity, he had that experience in the past. He has that in his soul. So he is never happy in this material world, because the happiness is fragmented. In the material world, the happiness is fragmented. It is same Krishna's energy, but Krishna is not there in the center. We are seeking happiness from all these fragmented, aspects of his energy, right? And that is why we are not getting that 100% happiness which we get in spiritual world when our activities are dovetailed to Krishna. Here we are getting a happiness, a part of happiness. If let's say X, Y, Z, let's say the three, I'm just taking a hypothetical example. We are just getting X. So we are still in want of the happiness from Y and Z. So we are not happy, we are not steady, we don't have that peace of mind. So we again follow another branch in the tree to get that Y. And when with the Y, we are not getting X and Z. So again, we are not happy. Okay. So we keep coming back to X, or maybe we'll try Z. So we keep circling in that circle of karma, because here in this world, all that exists in spiritual world is there, but because they're in perverted form, and they are not dovetailed to the service of Krishna, so we are not getting that happiness. Our happiness is broken here. We are just getting partial happiness. And that is why we are struggling hard. Sariram yad avapnoti yachapi utkramatishvara grihitvetani samyati vayur gandhan ivashayat. Sariram, the body, yat as, avapnoti, gets, yat as, chapi, also, utkramati, gives up, Ishvara, the Lord of the body. Grihitva, taking, etani, all these, samyati, goes away, vayu, the air, gandhan, smells, iva, like, ashayat, from their source. The living entity in the material world carries its different conceptions of life from one body to another, as the air carries aromas. Thus, it takes one kind of body and again quits it to take another, because he has that conception of life. He thinks that this type of life, I will be more happy. Okay, it's just like the air. If it goes over fragrant flowers, it carries the aroma of the fragrant flower. Okay, And then after that, if it goes over, a pungent smelling area, then it carries the aroma of that. He leaves this aroma, the aroma of the fragrant flower, and carries another. Just like that only, those various aromas are the conceptions of life. So based on the conception of life, he gets one body. Okay, he works towards that. He, gathers karma. He takes that body. He's not happy because, as I was explaining, this whole world is an energy of Krishna, no doubt, but they are all fragmented. So if you choose one, you lose others, lose the association of others, and thus you get one happiness, but then you don't have the happiness from the other energies of Krishna, right? And they have to be also, it is not just having them, but it is to be dovetailed to serve someone. A person may be very rich, he has almost every comfort in life, like, Parikshit Maharaj, he had everything, unparalleled, unopposed kingdom, but still he was not happy, basically, right? It's not happy. So like that. So in this world, even if you have everything, if it is only when it is dovetailed to Krishna's service, then you get that happiness. Thus he takes one kind of body, again quits it to take another. Srotram chakshu sparshanam cha rasanam granam eva cha adhisthaya manaschayam vishayanupasevate. Srotram, ears, chakshu, eyes, sparshanam, touch, cha, also, rasanam, tongue, granam, smelling power, eva, also, cha, and adhisthaya, being situated in mana, mind, cha, also, I am he, vishayan, sense objects, upasevate, enjoys. So in previous verse and this verse, Lord Krishna is actually, it is the same thing what he explained in those, in that example or analogy of the banyan tree, imperishable banyan tree. Those each element he's explaining further. That is what he's doing. So here he's talking about the senses, okay, and how it follows the sense objects, okay, how it follows and enjoys those sense objects. He's just giving more details about the same banyan tree, okay, how in the material world, the living entities are attracted by those sense objects, and how they enjoy those are through these senses. So he's just explaining it more. Utkramantam sthitam vapi bhunjanam va gunanvitam vimudhananupashyanti pashyanti jnana chakshusha. Utkramantam, quitting the body. Sthitam, situated in the body. Va api, either. Bhunjanam, enjoying. Va, or. Guna anvitam, under the spell of the modes of material nature. Vimudha, foolish persons. Na, never. Anupashyanti, can see. Pashyanti, can see. Jnana chaksusa, those who have the eyes of knowledge. Now, Lord Krishna is so far he has explained how the living entities are struggling here, is giving more details, is explaining the mechanisms behind it. Okay. But then he's also saying something else. What he's saying, the foolish cannot understand how a living entity can quit his body, nor can they understand what sort of body he enjoys under the spell of the modes of nature, which is 99% of the people. That is why they are following the cycle of karma. They're not getting happiness, but they're still fruitlessly following that cycle with a hope, the hope of happiness, the promise of happiness that they will get next life or maybe tomorrow, right? So they keep following that cycle of karma. But one whose eyes are trained in knowledge can see all this. One who has that Gyan Chakshu, his eyes are trained in knowledge, can see all this very clearly. How a living entity is quitting his body and what sort of body he will get. Okay. Or he is enjoying currently under the spell of the modes of nature. They can see clearly. Now, this again is related to that banyan tree, where Lord Krishna is saying that one must be strongly rooted. This rooted tree is very strongly rooted because of following, growing time immemorial. Now, one has to cut it with the weapon of detachment. Now, that person himself, which is basically is categorizing these people who are following that cycle of karma, it says foolish people cannot, they are just following that cycle. They think, they are happy, but they are not. But one whose eyes are trained in knowledge, so he is asking, Lord Krishna is saying that if someone there gets tired of that, then to get that weapon of detachment, one has to approach someone who has that eyes trained in knowledge, who can see all this very clearly. That person has to approach if someone gets tired. Or the persons who are trained in this knowledge should go out and awaken these foolish people, which we will, by the way, if some of us are going to tomorrow's, Thanksgiving, we will see a lot of them. Okay, Thanksgiving in San Francisco near Market Street, we will see a lot of them. And that is the activity we are going to do. We are not really proud of that, but we are just, we are also, we also have, I'm not saying that we are, already Krishna conscious and we have the eyes trending knowledge, but at least we believe in this. We believe in that authority, and we are trying to distribute that authority. So that is the example. We are trying to distribute that authority to the people at large who are fruitlessly following this cycle of karma, going up either to the heavenly planets or going down to the hellish. I mean, Kali Yuga, mostly people will go to the hellish, because there are few people who, because the conditions are not really favorable for doing pious activities in Kali Yuga, right? So it is even more important that we go out and distribute this the message of Krishna to the world. Yatanto yoginaschayanam pashyanti atmani avasthitam yatanto api akritatmano nainam pashyanti acetasha. Yatanta, endeavoring, yogina, transcendentalists, cha, also, enam, this, pashyanti, can see, atmani, in the self, avasthitam, situated, yatantah, endeavoring, api, although, akrita atmana, those without self-realization, na, do not, enam, this, pashyanti, see, achetasa, having undeveloped minds. The endeavoring transcendentalists were situated in self-realization. Not all transcendentalists. The transcendentalists who are already situated in self-realization can see all this clearly. They can clearly see, why a person is experiencing distress. They can relate it to the karma from his past life. But those whose minds are not developed and who are not situated in self-realization cannot see what is taking place, though they may try. What Lord Krishna is trying to say, they can speculate, but they cannot see. Seeing and speculating, there's a big difference. Like, for example, if a room is hot, let us say, and a person is standing outside the room, he can speculate whether the room is hot due to a central AC or a heater or a fireplace, but he knows there is a heating source. he exactly does not know what the heating source is. The person who is self-realized, just to take an analogy, is someone who is inside the room and knows exactly what is the source. He will know it is because of the maybe fireplace. That's why the room is hot. Right? He knows it. So that's the difference between a self-realized person or the person who are endeavoring transcendentalists, but who has not reached the stage of self-realization. And that is what Srila Prabhupada is writing in the purport. Here, Lord Krishna, when he says yogis and Gyan Chakshu, he is not talking about, the yogis who are doing like gymnastics and, at different stages, but has not reached the self-realized stage. The bhakti yogis, the pure bhakti yogis, pure devotional service, of course. You have to reach that stage. So they surpass this, even the yogis who have reached the self-realized stage. They can see very clearly. Okay. Yad aditya gatam tejo jagat bhashayate akhilam yat chandramasi yat shagnau tat tejo vidhi mamakam. Okay. Now, before I go to this verse, I wanted to explain another thing on the previous verse. The reason why Lord Krishna is saying this again related to that banyan tree, the weapon of detachment. So we have to make sure that we have to be very, if you really want to, are tired of this, banyan tree, the imperishable banyan tree, and you want to cut it with the weapon of detachment, we need to get that weapon first. And that weapon is with these self-realized souls. So we have to be very careful in searching for this right self-realized soul and not the pretentious ones. That is why Lord Krishna is giving details about this kind of soul. They can see clearly. So they have to go to that kind of soul, because that person has to see clearly why this person is suffering. And then, prescribe him the right procedures or scriptures or mantra or whatever the process he needs to follow to relieve himself and bring him to the same stage as he is, right? So that he can also get happiness and not disturbed by the material modes of nature. So that's what I wanted to point out. So that's very important. That is why Lord Krishna stressed on that fact, that you cannot go to anyone. That person has to be self-realized. So yat, that which aditya gatam, in the sunshine, teja, splendor, jagat, the whole world, bhashyate, illuminates, akhilam, entirely, yat, that which chandramas, in the moon, yat, that which ja, also, agnav, in fire, tat, that teja, splendor, vidhi, understand, mamakam, from me. So Lord Krishna, remember in one of the previous verse, he was talking about some characteristics of the spiritual world. Now here he's saying that those characteristics like the sun, moon, fire, electricity is needed in this world, and he is the source of that. But in that world, you don't need them, is because there is no, another concept not really explained in here. There is no Maya there to cover. There is no Mahamaya, the material modes of nature. The Mahamaya, the Trigunamai, who creates that material modes of nature, doesn't exist there, doesn't have any influence there. There is a Maya there, Yog Maya, but Yog Maya enables, doesn't block. That is the characteristic of Yog Maya. When Yog Maya sees the living entities want to serve the Supreme Personality of Godhead, then she enables them. And that is why there is no need of external sun, moon, and electricity, fire. They are in the spiritual world. But in the material world, you need them because we are blocked by Mahamaya. Because, and then of course, she is not to blame, it's us. Basically, our desires have put us into the place because we wanted to stay away from Krishna. So we created a curtain so that we can stay away from Krishna. But in that process, we go into the world which is dark, and therefore we need all these external agents. So Krishna is so merciful that even though we forced Maya to draw a curtain, he knew that living entities are helpless, and therefore he is present in this world through sun, moon, fire, electricity to help us out. Okay. Although personally he does not come here. I mean, through avatars and leelas, that's a different story. But in general, he personally does not appear. Okay. Gam avishya cha bhutani dharayami aham ojasha pushnami chaushadhi sharva shomu bhutva rashatmaka. Again, further his mercy. I enter into each planet, and by my energy they stay in orbit. I become the moon and thereby supply the juice of life to all vegetables. We are trying to shoot satellites, rockets, so many things. Imagine such a large planet like Earth or Moon. They are floating in orbit already, and they're much more full or complete there, right? It has gravity, it has so many different types of living entities, earth, water, fire, everything else. They're here for us to enjoy everything. Right? It is already there. Right? And what is causing them to stay in orbit? It is Lord Krishna's energy. Now we can say that, oh no, it is gravity. But then the question would be, what is the source of the gravity? Oh, because those two objects have two mass. What is the source of their mass? Right? Oh, because they are made up of atoms. What is the source of the atom? You have to keep asking that question, and you will see that ultimately there is a supreme time factor, which is the cause, and the cause of the time and the source of the time factor is Lord Krishna himself, which was already told in the 11th chapter, universal form, which is causing all this. So these laws of physics, what we say, are actually symptoms of that time factor, which ultimately the source is Lord Krishna. So I become the moon and thereby supply the juice of life to all vegetables. Right? So he becomes the moon and he supplies juice of life. If you go to a shop and buy vegetables, at that time you see them very succulent. You bring home, let's say you forget to put in refrigerator, you will see after some days it becomes dry, wrinkles and everything, right? After that, we don't eat that. Because why? Because that juice is gone, basically, which is the source of that, the energy is gone. If you eat that vegetable, it's not going to serve much purpose, right? So Krishna is giving that juice of life to those vegetables. So Lord Krishna, even though we have, consciously made a decision to stay away from him, following that imperishable banyan tree, but how that tree works, all those different planetary systems, how do they work, right? That is all given by him. We could not have done that without his help. So you have to imagine his mercy. Although we don't want him, he knows that we cannot stay without his help. So he's personally not there, but through his time factor, he creates this arrangement so that we can enjoy to our heart's content. But because he's not present personally, it's not dovetailed towards him, we kind of pretentiously enjoy that. We really never become happy, and we keep following that cycle of karma, because we always want something else, because this thing which we achieve now doesn't give us the complete happiness. So in this verse he's saying how he is supporting life, okay, in this material world. Aham Vaishvanaro Bhutva Praninam Deham Ashrita Pranapana Shamayukta Pachami Annam Chaturvidham. Right? I, Vaishnavara, my plenary portion as the digesting fire, Bhutva, becoming, Praninam, of all living entities, Deham, in the bodies, Ashrita, situated, Prana, the outgoing air, Apana, the downgoing air, Shamayukta, keeping in balance, Pachami, I digest, Annam, foodstuff, Chaturvidam, the four kinds. I am the fire of digestion in the bodies of all living entities, and I join with the air of life, outgoing and incoming, to digest the four kinds of foodstuff. So he is present there, and he has created this elaborate mechanism within our body so that we can digest the foodstuff. Imagine the engineering. The human body is actually a marvel of engineering. I'll tell you one example. I was in one of an entrepreneurs conference. Okay, there the Stanford medical scientists and that the data scientists on the audience. They were explaining that how to how to apply data science to the intractable problems of medical. And then the data scientists were telling them, give us a model, at least give us a model of the physiology. If you cannot give a model structure, not the functional part, at least give us that model, tell us and what do they function, and then we can create a model, data science model, and it will serve the purpose. The medical science, the Stanford medical scientist says that forget about it. Just 1 week back, we unearthed a tissue in the brain which we are unaware of. And this type of thing keeps happening in the medical world. So imagine there are parts within the body, even today the doctors don't know they exist, and they accidentally hit upon. Our human body is so complex. And if someone says that, it automatically came, it's very hard to believe. If your car, all the parts of the car are strewn on the road, will they come back automatically and become a car? No, we have to assemble them in a factory. So how do you think, how is it if someone says is automatically this human body evolved from cell, one single cell? It's very hard to believe. It's so complex, but he gave us this whole arrangement. Even though we said that we don't want anything of you, Krishna, we want to enjoy separately. And he knew that we won't be able to survive even a second without him, and he gave us all this arrangement. Right? So complex, it's a complex machinery, this whole universe, everything is there, it is going on based on those rules. He gave us those so that all these various things in the universe goes on, and we are able to enjoy. Although again, we are not happy, right? Krishna is not there in the center. This is another famous verse. Sarvasya cha aham hridishani visto matah smriti jnanam apohanam cha vedascha sarver aham eva vedyo vedanta krit vedavid eva chaham. Sarvasya, of all living beings, cha, and aham, I, hridi, in the heart, sanivista, situated, matah, from me, smriti, remembrance, jnanam, knowledge, apohanam, forgetfulness, cha, and Vedai, by the Vedas, cha, also, sarve, all, aham, I am, eva, certainly, vedya, knowable, vedanta krit, the compiler of the Vedanta, vedavid, the knower of the Vedas, eva, certainly, cha, and aham, I. So he's saying, I'm seated in everyone's heart, from me come remembrance, knowledge, and forgetfulness. By all the Vedas, I am to be known. Indeed, I am the compiler of Vedanta, and I am the knower of the Vedas. So he's saying he's sitting in everyone's heart. So when heart he is mentioning, it is not really the heart as an organ. If someone has pacemaker, right, does it mean Lord Krishna is not there as Paramatma in his heart? No. It's actually is talking about the seat of emotions, which is the region of heart. Okay. That is where he is seated. Okay. And he gives him that remembrance, knowledge, and forgetfulness. He does not disclose all the things that a living entity went through in his past life, but he does give that impression, that impetus to the living entity in this current life based on the things he has done in the past life, his unfinished business, unfinished desires. He gives him that knowledge. Okay. So he is, so because otherwise we'll be burdened, because most of the time, we went through misery, right? The nature of this world is ashashvatam dukhalam. That means in the past lives we went through many ashashvatam dukhalam. This life itself we cannot deal with. If imagine Lord Krishna has exposed us to all that we have done in our past lives, that would be like a huge amount of distress. We won't be able to do anything, right? We are already overwhelmed with the distress in this life. So that is the reason he makes us forget all that we have done in our past life, but it does impel us to follow a particular path based on the unfinished desire we had. That he does. So without burdening us, he is guiding us. He's he's asking us to move forward rather than speculate on the past. By all the Vedas I am to be known. Indeed, I am the compiler of Vedanta. Compiler of Vedanta, of course, is talking about his incarnation as Ved Vyas, and I am the knower of the Vedas. He's actually talking about this. So it's all talking about this Paramatma. By all the Vedas I am to be known. He's talking about that Paramatma, which is situated in everyone's heart. Right? So I will stop again. It is 8:17. We have like 13 minutes. I don't know if anyone has any question, and then we'll finish the rest of the verses. Anyone has any questions, comments, feedback? Anything we have in online? Let me check quickly. Okay, we don't have any questions online. Any questions here? Anyone? Any feedback? Comments? Okay, so looks like we don't have any comments or feedback, so we will go back. Dvau imau purushau loke sharaschakshara evacha shara sharvani bhutani kutastho akshara uchyate. Dvau, two, imau, these, purushau, living entities, loke, in the world, shara, fallible, cha, and akshara, infallible, eva, certainly, cha, and shara, fallible, sarvani, all, bhutani, living entities, kutastha, in oneness, akshara, infallible, is said. There are two classes of beings, the fallible and the infallible. In the material world, every living entity is fallible, and in the spiritual world, every living entity is called infallible. So it is the world almost like which determines the fallibility of a living entity. If you are in material world, you are fallible. In spiritual world, you are infallible, right? And why the spiritual world has been further described by the word kutastha, in oneness. So what makes a spiritual world? When you are in harmony with the Lord's desire, right? And you act accordingly, you are in spiritual world. When you are not in harmony, you are in disharmony, right? You are trying to, follow your own desires, you are actually in material world, and then you are fallible. So Lord Krishna is given, not only talks about the two worlds, he also talks about the beings there. Okay. So you can imagine infallible means they are, most of the time, not only they're infallible because they're in oneness with the Lord, because the devotional service they do, that also is perfect there. Okay? They never fail because of their infallibility. In material world, because they're in disharmony with the Lord, many times they fail, in their acts, in their trying to achieve the desire. But even if they pass, even if they achieve that desire, that sense object, the purpose with which they achieved it, to be happy, they don't get it. So in other words, they are fallible. Even if in material world, you have to understand that even if you get success here, you are still fallible, because the whole purpose of that success, okay, to achieving that sense object, which can be position or recognition or some object or relationship, whatever that may be, doesn't matter. That purpose was to get happiness, and you don't get that happiness. If you did, then there would not have been so many branches in that imperishable tree. The reason why there are so many branches in that imperishable tree is because you don't get happiness. And that is why you search for another branch of that imperishable tree, right? Uttamah purusastva anyah paramatmeti udahrita yo lokatrayam avishya vibharti avvaya ishvara. Uttama, the best, Purusha, personality, two, but Anya, another, Param Atma, the Supreme Self, Iti, thus, Udahrita is said, Ya, who, Loka, of the universe, Trayam, three divisions, Avishya, entering, Vibharti is maintaining, Avvaya, inexhaustible, Ishvara, the Lord. Besides these two, that is the infallible and fallible living entities, there is the greatest living personality, the Supreme Soul, the imperishable Lord Himself, who has entered the three worlds and is maintaining them. So here again, imperishable Lord. So what we're discussing some time back is that if Brahman is imperishable, which was the last statement in the 14th chapter, right? Last verse. And that banyan tree is imperishable, whose source is the imperishable Lord, as he explained in the first few verses of this chapter, has to be imperishable. We were sort of deducting that, but here there is an authoritative statement that Lord is imperishable. Okay, so it confirms that. At that time, it was just an inference, but now it is a deduction. Okay, he is imperishable, right? And he is the greatest living personality. Okay, and besides this too, why his category is different, and that will be explained much better in the next verse, and we'll go there. But in this verse, he's saying he's maintaining that. Means that whole banyan tree, that imperishable banyan tree, the imaginary one, okay, which banyan tree is an analogy, he is maintaining that. The Vedic hymns, the material modes of nature, the sense objects, how they will work. Of course, that is all done through his Daivi Maya, but they are following under his supervision, which is in some other chapters, Lord Krishna is saying, right? His Daivi Maya is working, but then he is working under his supervision. So indirectly, he is controlling those three worlds. Right? Yashmat saram atito aham aksharaadapi chottama atosmi loke vedecha pratita purushottama. Yashmat, because, sharam, to the fallible, atita, transcendental, aham, I am, aksharat, beyond the infallible, api, also, cha, and, uttama, the best, atah, therefore, ashmi, I am, loke, in the world, vede, in the Vedic literature, cha, and, pratitha, celebrated, purusha, tama, as the Supreme Personality. Because I'm transcendental beyond both the fallible and the infallible, and because I'm the greatest, I am celebrated both in the world and in the Vedas as that Supreme Person. What is the specialty of the Supreme Person? That he is beyond fallible and infallible, and is transcendental to both. What does it mean? That even a person in material world is fallible. In spiritual world, he is infallible. That means if he tries to come to the material world and enjoy, he will become fallible. But Supreme Person is separate. Even if he comes in the material world, he is not fallible. That is what distinguishes him. And that is why he is the greatest. And he is celebrated both in the world. When he says world, in the world, he's actually talking about the Agama scriptures, how it's been described in Agama scriptures, which is Puranas, Itihas, and all that, his Leelas. and also in the Vedas, which is basically, the conclusive part of the Vedas, the Upanishads and all that, the Shrutis. So in the Smritis is described, he's celebrated both in the world and in the Shrutis, which is the Vedas. In both places, he has been described as the Supreme Person. And that is his special, and that is why he's the greatest, because even if he comes to the material world, he is not fallible. Okay, he still remains infallible. Yo mam evam ashammudho janati purushottamam sa sarvavid bhajati mam sarva bhavena bharata. Whoever knows me as the Supreme Personality of Godhead without doubting, keyword, without doubting, is the knower of everything. He therefore engages himself in full devotional service to me, O son of Bharat. So, knowing him as Supreme Personality of Godhead without doubting means that everything that is happening in the world is under his direction and is right. Okay, at least the major events, right? He is right. We cannot doubt it, and that is, of course, it is very high stage. We have this Uttamadhikari, Madhyamadhikari, and Kanishtadhikari. This is a stage of Uttamadhikari. Okay, that is why he 100% engages only in Bhajananandi, right? So now, of course, sometimes to bring people to that stage, sometimes the Bhajananandis, they come down to the stage of Madhyamadhikari, and they go and engage in preaching activity because they want to distribute that joy what they themselves are getting, right? Because they see that people are suffering. This is again pointing back to that previous verse of that endeavoring transcendentalists who are self-realized. Is pointing to that verse. I'm trying to point to that verse, that endeavoring transcendentalists who are in self-realized stage, they come down to the even preaching stage, because when they see the people are suffering, sometimes people may not get tired. They may keep on hopping from one branch to another, forever, this life, next life, and keep making that tree bigger and bigger and create problems for themselves and others, right? They will keep doing that. So the humanity does not go into a hopeless condition. These people, these Uttamadhikaris, even though they know everything is happening as per the God's laws, as per the, the Paramatma within their heart, they come down so that the tree does not go uncontrolled. Okay? And the people, do not lose hope. They come down and they preach the philosophy, the message of Lord Krishna. Okay? To preach them that weapon of detachment. And so, yeah, and that helps them, that doubting, without doubting, that stage, they want to seed that in their heart also, in the heart of the people they preach. Because otherwise, theoretically, we can always understand, the Supreme Personality of Godhead is controlling everything. But when something happens which is not very favorable to us, we start questioning. Hey, I had been chanting 16 rounds and all this devotional service and all this we are doing. Then why this bad thing is happening to me, right? We start doubting, right? And so therefore, we need the presence of these self-realized souls in our life, so that they can see that devotional service in our heart without doubt. It has to be without doubt. We have to learn to tolerate, because we had been in this for so many lifetimes that we have to also burn those karmas, right? So things may happen which we may or may not like, right? So we need the support of the self-realized souls around us. Iti guhya tamam shastram idam muktam maya nagha etad buddhva buddhiman syat krita krityascha bharata. Iti, thus, guhya tamam, the most confidential, shastram, revealed scripture, idam, this, uktam, disclosed, maya, by me, anagha, O sinless one, etad, this, Buddha, understanding. Buddhiman, intelligent. Syat, one becomes. Krita Kritya, the most perfect in his endeavors. Cha, and Bharata, son of Bharat. This is the most confidential part of the Vedic scripture, so sinless one, and it is disclosed now by me. Whoever understands this will become wise, and in his endeavors will know perfection. Right? So this is the most confidential part, because in Vedic scriptures, that whole maze of that banyan tree is explained. If you consider that Vedic scriptures, as that banyan tree, that it's like a complex maze of all kind of, if you want this, then you want a beautiful wife, go to Uma. If you want to become a hero, go to Lord Shiva. If you want a strong body, go to Earth. Now all these Vedic hymns and elaborate, procedures you have to follow. What is the ultimate purpose? Ultimate purpose is to get tired of all that and search for that weapon of detachment, and then go to a realized soul. That is the ultimate purpose. And that realized soul then will help you, take you not only to Brahman, but beyond Brahman, the source of Brahman, the supreme Brahman, that supreme person. So that is the most confidential part of the scriptures Lord Krishna is talking about. Of course, this is all still theoretical, and more we engaged in devotional service, in the association of realized souls, more and more our heart will be clean, more will feel less distress in our society, and we'll be able to, make our journey steady toward that supreme person, Lord Krishna. I will now close here. I'll stop sharing. And any final comments or feedback? I'm past 2 minutes, so I can go ahead and close this session. If there are no questions, let me quickly check if there are any questions online. Sorry. No questions online. Yeah. Anything in the chat? There is nothing in the chat, so I'm going to